Hello, in this video we're looking at issue 44 of Warhammer 40,000 Imperium magazine, adding another ruin to our terrain collection, and then fighting the largest battle so far. Hello, I'm Mike and this is Will. We are the Tabletop Donkeys.
Hello.
And we're bringing you issue 44 of Warhammer 40,000 Imperium magazine today. And this issue we're adding another ruin to our terrain collection. And if you'd like to see it on the battlefield, you can use one of the time codes in the description or use the chapter bars. But we'll have a look through the issue first, as always. First up we have some more background on Battlezone Alectia. So Alectia Prime is the main hive on Alectia, and you can see pictured here is one of the many Adeptus Ministorum holy sites. So this is used for the game in this issue, where it intends you to play it 3 times and you have a different district the Necrons and the Imperium are fighting over, and you can record it on this battle record. Then we have background on the White Scars chapter of Space Marines. Originally the 5th Space Marine Legion. They found their Primarch Jagatai Khan on the world Trigoris, and their name comes from the fact that they wear white armour, and Trigorians practiced ritual scarification, and they are lightning assault specialists, specialising in hit and run warfare, and they make heavy use of bikes and land speeders and so on. And over here you can see some examples of the vehicles they use, so the Raider Pattern Combat Bike and the Invader ATVs, and Corsaro Khan, captain of the 3rd Company. And then more history of the Battle Sisters, of the Reign of Blood. So this was mentioned in a previous issue, but this is Goj Van Dyer decided to bloodily enact his rule by removing anyone who would oppose him by accusing them of heresy. And he travelled to the planet of San Lior, where he met a group called the Daughters of the Emperor, who would eventually become his sort of personal guard. But eventually a man named Sebastian Thor decided to lead other forces of the Imperium in revolt against Goj Van Dyer to counter his horrifying rule. And then the Daughters of the Emperor proved to be an extremely dangerous part of Van Dyer's guards until a force of the Adeptus Custodes infiltrated the palace and met with the leaders, Alectia Dominica and her 5 most trusted sisters. The Custodes led these sisters to meet with the Emperor himself, and nobody knows exactly what was said, but afterwards Alectia Dominica and her sisters turned on Goj Van Dyer and slew him themselves. And after this they became the Sisters of Battle. It was decreed that the ecclesiarchy could have no men under arms, but obviously the sisters fell outside this decree, called the Decree Passive, so the Adeptus Sororitas became the military arm of the church. And then we have the build guide for the room we got with this issue. The kit is slightly different. It's the 2 halves of the other kits we've had so far. So you have the wall section here, which you've had before, and then the smaller of the 2 buildings. It's built exactly the same way. And then the painting guide is exactly the same as well. So there you can see the completed room there. So now I'll hand you over to Will, because we have a fair number of new rules to learn in this issue.
So before we can get into the game, first up we have a tutorial about placing terrain. So rather than using the pre-assigned places that the battle map shows it, in this game we're going to be placing the terrain as we see fit. Not a hard and fast method here, but it just gives you some general considerations, like for example making sure there are lines of fire for ranged units while also providing cover for melee units to run across the board, and movement spaces for large models, whether you want to make the battlefield symmetrical or asymmetrical to help with game balance, not putting too much impassable terrain near objectives, and also terrain variety as well, just to make it look more interesting. And further to that, there's a couple of examples here. Firstly, of a more balanced terrain setup where it's roughly symmetrical so that each player is affected equally by the terrain, and then a more thematic setup where one side of the battlefield has heavier terrain which a defender could be defending against an attacker running across the open ground. You do have to be a bit more careful with this sort of thing because you don't want to give one side too much of an advantage, but it can make for a very sort of thematic narrative games if you do it well. And then we have some more rules, this time for strategic reserves, which is units that are kept out of the battle to start with in order to come in later. There is a distinction between this and reinforcements, which is things you've seen us use before, like for example the flayed ones being able to turn up later in the battle, abilities that are on their datasheets, so letting them to be set up somewhere else. Strategic reserves are something you actually have to decide before deployment, and usually you'd have to pay resources for effectively. So as it says here, you can only place units in strategic reserve if your army is battle forged. You can also pay command points to put them in strategic reserves, and the total combined power of units in strategic reserve costs different numbers of command points to place in, as determined by the table here. All of those things we haven't learned about yet, but we'll get to that in a moment over the page. But when a unit arrives from strategic reserve, it has to arrive in the reinforcement step at the end of the movement phase. They can't arrive in the first battle round, so not in your first movement phase. When they are set up, if they arrive on turn 2, they have to be within 6 inches of any battlefield edge other than the enemy's battlefield edge and also not in the opponent's deployment zone. In turn 3 and onwards, they can arrive within 6 inches of any battlefield edge except the opponent's one, even in their deployment zone. Regardless of where they are, they have to be more than 9 inches away from enemy models, with the exception that if you set them up within 1 inch of your own battlefield edge and wholly within your own deployment zone, they can be within 9 inches of an enemy model and even placed in engagement range of enemy models that have strayed too close, and if they do that they actually count as charging as well. And over the page it notes that the same rules apply for things emerging from reinforcements to strategic reserves, that is to say they can't move any further, but otherwise they can shoot and charge and act normally otherwise. And there's also a bit about aircraft and strategic reserves, but we don't have any aircraft in the collection, so I won't go over that. And then there is a tutorial for strategic reserves. As it says here, you declare the strategic reserves before the battle. And here there's a note about power levels, command points and strategic reserves, which were mentioned previously. It says that all of those things will be explained later on in the magazine, but for the purposes of scout and initiate missions, so the ones we're playing through at the moment, players can always place up to 2 units in strategic reserves unless the mission says otherwise. And then there's just an example of them in use here, so these aggressors have arrived in a strategic reserve and they're in range to shoot. And finally we'll be on to our battle, so there's the background for it. As we know, the shrine world of Alectia Prime is covered in holy sites, and the Necron Overlord, leading the invasion, frustrated by his underlings' lack of progress, has once again decided to lead some strikes personally to destroy shrines and key facilities, while the Ultramarines and their Primaris captain are running back and forth trying to bolster the Imperial defences, doing their best to protect the holy shrines and so forth, but obviously they can't be everywhere. It does also here say that the following game should be played 3 times, and then we record the results in the page we had earlier during the magazine proper, changing the terrain every time. We will just play it once, because apart from setting up the terrain, the game is just going to be the same every time, and otherwise this would be a very long video, but you get the idea. You're supposed to play this 3 times. So here is our mission, Domination. Once again, it says Scout Mission, it should say Initiate Mission. The Necrons have an Overlord, a Royal Warden, 10 Warriors, 5 Immortals, 3 Scorpec Destroyers, 1 Canoptic Spider and 3 Canoptic Scarab Swarms, while the Imperial Forces, it says Ultramarines again, have the Primaris Captain, the Librarian, the Tech Priest Dominus, 5 Assault Intercessors, 10 Skitarii Rangers and 3 Aggressors. The battlefield looks like this. We've got 2 boards, those from issue 4 and issue 18. There are 4 objectives, which are placed as you can see there with measurements as determined, and then an attackers and defenders deployment zones on either end, 5 inches on. After we've placed the objective markers, it says we should set up the terrain as we see fit, and you'll see that when we get to the battlefield. And then beginning with the defender, players alternate deploying their units, although remember that we do have the option of using strategic reserves in this game. And the objective take and hold, so at the end of the attacker's turn they score a victory point for controlling objectives markers 1 and 2, those are the ones in the centre, and 3 victory points for controlling objective 4, which is the one on the defender's end of the board. No victory points for their own objective, objective 3, whereas for the defender it's reversed, so they get 3 victory points for objective 3 and none for objective 4. And it's 5 battle rounds and whoever has the most victory points wins. So we'll show you the battlefield and our deployment and then get straight into the game. So we set up the battlefield as you can see here with the terrain that we thought looked pleasing, relatively balanced I suppose, there's a decent amount of terrain on both sides. We've got the new set of ruins on the right hand side there near objective 4, and then our other 2 sets of ruins placed further to the left. And you can see a container and the hematite reactor and some pipes and a few boxes and barrels and things. And you can see the objectives where they are specified to be. So the 2 in the middle can be scored by anyone, and the ones on either end can only be scored by the opposite side. They might want to roll off and decided to be the attacker with the Imperium, so here's the forces he's deployed on the board first of all.
Got the captain behind the assault intercessors, and the captain's going to be my warlord, although it makes too much difference in this game. And then I've got these Skitarii Rangers above them with the Tech Priest Dominus behind. Now I'm going to put 2 units in strategic reserve, the Primaris Librarian and the Aggressors.
And then the Necrons, I have the Warriors on the left hand side, the Overlord behind them, the Canoptic Spider, the Royal Warden, 3 Scarab Swarms, and then the Immortals down on the right as you see it. And then I decided to keep the Scorpec Destroyers in strategic reserve to arrive later. All that leaves us to do is to roll off to see who can go first. So we'll be rolling off to decide. I've rolled a 6. To roll. Again. Right, there we go. I've won, and I decided to go second. So that means we will be into Imperium turn 1.
So, well, at the start of the first battle round, I'm going to use the 3-inch Ranger move for the Rangers. I'm also going to pick the Protector Imperative to be active. I'm not going to bother activating any of the Canticles yet. I don't think it's really going to make any difference for the Dominus.
And the command protocol for the first battle round, which I get to use because I do have a Noble as my Warlord, will be Protocol of the Eternal Guardian, and I'll pick the directive that means all my units count as being in light cover if they haven't moved yet, which they won't have.
My movement phase, the Rangers moved up normally, and they're all in range of the Warriors now. Everyone else advanced. The Assault Intercessors rolled a 6, so they can all get into that middle building. Captain's going to be lagging behind a bit, and the Dominus is going to follow up behind the Rangers. So in my shooting phase, the Rangers will shoot. The Sniper will shoot at the Spider, whereas everyone else will shoot at the Warriors. So I do the Sniper shot first. It's hitting on a 3. I get -1 because I moved, but +1 from the Protector Imperative. And this is re-rolling 1s because of the Dominus. Re-roll the 1. Into a hit. Wounds on a 3. Toughness 6, yeah. It wounds normally.
5+ save for the Spider. Nope, failed with the 1.
Presumably it doesn't get cover.
No, yeah, it might get cover, but I roll 1.
D3 damage. 1. 6 rifles on the Warriors, also hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s. Reroll the 1s. 10 hits, wounding on 4s. 4 wounds.
-1, but I have cover from my command protocol, so 4 pluses. Failed 2, so 2 dice so far.
1 shot from the arc rifle hits on the 2 rerolling 1s. It hits, wounds on a 3. It does. It's -2.
So with cover, that's a 5+, which I made.
And the plasma, which isn't going to supercharge, 2 shots on 2s rerolling 1s. 2 hits. 3s.
6s to save. Made neither, so a total of 4 dead, which I will just roll from the animations immediately. Even 5s rerolling 1s, getting 1 with 2 1s to reroll. No, it's just 1, so 3 dead. Or more accurately, 4 dead who came off the back and then 1 reanimated out of the front of the unit. But no more shooting, so that's it for Imperium turn 1, on to Necron's turn 1. In my command phase, the Spider heals that wound it took, and the Overlord will be done on the Immortals. And then in the movement phase, we are moving like so. The Warriors get a couple of themselves within the ruins for the cover. The 2 characters are following them. The Spider and the Scarabs have moved out. I could get the Scarabs in range of Objective 2, but that would require getting into charge range of the Assault Intercessor, so I'm not going to do that. And finally, the Immortals have just moved up to this barricade here. So in the shooting phase, we'll start with the Royal Warden. He can just about see an Assault Intercessor through the gaps between the 2 buildings from where he is. 2 shots with his Relic Gauss Blaster, hitting all on 3s. Both hit. Wounding on 3s. We've got 1. With an AP -2, but they're in cover.
So 4+. Made it.
And then 5 shots from the Immortals also at them, hitting on 2s because of my will be done. So they all hit. Wounding on 3s. And 5.
5 4+s again. Ooh, failed 4, so it's 2 dead Assault Intercessors. So I just took away the 2 at the back.
Then the Warriors are going to shoot at the Skitarii Rangers. 7 shots, hitting on 3s. 5 hits. Wounding on 3s. 2.
5+ armor saves. Fail both. Take away 2 of the riflemen.
But no more shooting. I actually managed to move the Spider where it can't see anything to shoot. So that's the end of my turn. And we'll be on to Imperium turn 2.
Pretend the Assault Intercessors haven't moved yet, because at the start of the battle round I go to pick the Bulwark Imperative to be active, so that's +1 save, -3-inch movement for my Rangers, and then I'm going to choose Benediction of the Omnissiah to be active for the Dominus, which is the reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, and 1 damage roll when shooting.
And command protocol for this turn will be Southern Storm, and I'm going to pick the directive which is +1 movement. In terms of sequencing here, both of these things happen at the start of the battle round, and because it's nobody's turn, technically what we had to do was roll off to decide which thing would happen first. And I actually won roll off and decided to make the Imperium pick their things first, because that way he couldn't see which one mine was in order to make a decision on it.
So in my movement phase, the Assault Intercessors have moved out, and they'll actually be able to hold both of those objectives, because it's on a per model basis who holds the objectives. Captain's going to move up behind to back them up, while the Skitarii Rangers are going to hold position with the Dominus behind, so they don't get any penalties for moving and shooting. And I'm actually going to bring in one of my reserve units, the Aggressors, over on near the top of the battlefield, 9 inches away from those Warriors.
And within 6 inches of that board edge.
I'm going to start the shooting with the Aggressors. They're going to put their Flame Storm Gauntlets into the Warriors. 66 automatic hits, 20. And these wound on 4s.
That was 10 wounds. I've got 2 Necrons in cover, so I will take the saves on them first, needing 3 pluses. They're both alive. 2 more. One's dead. 1 at a time on the remaining one. It's dead. And that means 5 who are not in cover on 4 pluses. Only failing 1 of those, so 3 dead, including the 2 who were in cover. How many of those will come back? 1 of them will. That's the end result of that.
I'll do the Rangers next. The Sniper will shoot at the Royal Warden, who he can see, and then everyone else will shoot at the Warriors. So I'll do the Sniper shot. It hits on a 3 rolling 1s. He hit. Wounds on a 3. It does.
5+ save. Failed.
D3 damage. 2.
Roll 1's down to 2 wounds.
You have 4 galvanic rifles on the warriors. On 3s you're rolling 1s. Roll the 2 1s. Getting 6 hits. And 4s. 3 wounds.
Well, reanimated somebody back into cover, so he'll take a 4+ save, which he failed, and then 2 more 5+. Not made both of those.
The arc rifle on a 3 rolling 1s. Misses. And 2 plasma little supercharging on 3s rolling 1s. Gets a hit. Wounds on a 3. It does. It's a dead warrior.
Do they reanimate? Oh, they do. And because I'm down to 5 models, the coherency restrictions are not so bad, so they'll come back like this. They're trying to make a bit more progress towards the middle objectives.
Do the assault intercessors next. They're going to shoot the warriors as well. Not going to supercharge the plasma, so black dice with the plasma. These all hit on 3s, roll on 1s. Roll the 1. I've got 1 bolt pistol hit in total. Wounds on 4. It does.
This on 1 in cover for a 4+ save, which I failed. Does it get back up? No.
Finally, the Tech Priest Dominus, shooting with his Volkite blaster. 3 shots hitting on 2s. I can re-roll one of these. So I'll re-roll that 1. They will hit. Wounding on 3s. 6s do 2 mortal wounds in addition, and I can re-roll one of these as well. So let's re-roll that 1. Oh, into a 6. So that's 3 wounds and 2 mortal wounds.
We've still got 1 in cover, so he'll just take the saves on 3+. No, he dies, and then 2 more on 4+. Oh, they die as well. So actually with the mortal wounds, that's enough to finish off the unit, I think. Yeah, there's only 4 left, so with the 2 mortal wounds, that's enough to wipe them out. And then that will be all the shooting, because the captain's not in range. The aggressors aren't in range to charge anything anymore, although they are allowed to after deploying from strategic reserve. And then at the end of the turn, the Imperium gain 2 victory points for holding objectives 1 and 2. So we'll be on to Necrons, turn 2. In the command phase, the Royal Warden healed a wound, and my will be done went on the Immortals, so the only core unit I have left. And then in the movement phase, everyone's moved around this side of the building. Scarabs, with their extra movement from the protocol, were able to get right up in the face of these assault intercessors, and everyone else was following along behind. The Immortals had hopped over their boxes, thanks again to their extra movement. I think I'm going to hold off bringing in the destroyers this turn. So then we're on to the shooting phase, where we'll start with the Royal Warden. He only moves normally, so he can shoot at the assault intercessors. 4 shots on 3s. 2 hits wounding on 3s. No, 1.
5+ save. Nope. So that's a dead assault intercessor. I'll take away this one.
The Immortals shooting at them as well. 1's not within 15 inches, so 9 shots hitting on 2s. They all hit. Wounding on 3s. 6 wounds.
5 ups.
There we go. That's a 5, so actually only 3 damage.
Yeah. So normal guy dies. Sarge has 1 wound remaining.
And I want to leave the Sergeant alive so I can charge him, so the Canoptic Spider will shoot at the Sigatari Rangers. It can just about see one of them that it's in range of. 12 shots hitting on 4s. 6 hits. Strength 5, so wounding on 3s. 5 wounds with no AP.
5 3+ saves because of Protector Doctrine. Failed 2. Take away that one and that one.
And then in the charge phase, the Scarabs will charge that Assault Intercessor. The charge roll is a 5. Finishing their charge like that, staying more than 3 inches from the captain, but leaving space for the Canoptic Spider to have a go. It will need a decent roll, or an 11 is enough. So it finishes like that. And I'll pick the Spider to go first. It will pile in slightly just around this way. 5 attacks on 4s. Only 2 hits. Wounding on 2s though. That's 2 wounds, AP -3.
Double 6s.
Oh, nearly.
Made 1, but no, he goes down. Blech.
And the Spider's just consolidated slightly towards the captain, not getting in range, but trying to stay out of the sight of the Rangers. And the Scarabs likewise, also moving away from the aggressors, because I can pick them to fight, because they did charge. But then that's the end of my turn, and I now hold objectives 1 and 2, so I gain 2 victory points. And then we'll be on to Imperium turn 3. Start of the battle round, Mike will on the roll off this time, and he's going to make me reveal my command protocol first. So we've got Protocol of the Vengeful Stars, and I can pick the directive, which means that unmodified 6s to wound with shooting are an extra -1 AP.
So for my imperative, I'm going to choose the Aggressor Imperative, which is +3 inches of movement but -1 save, and Litany of the Electromancer for my Canticle, which is -1 to hit the Dominus in melee. So in my movement phase, the captain's going to move out around the building. Can't quite get in range of the objective, but he can always charge the Spider if he needs to. The Skitarii have moved up to take objective 1. The Dominus is following behind, and you can probably see the Spider through that door. The aggressors have moved forward as well to get in range of the Scarabs. And then my final strategic reserve, I'm going to bring in the Librarian near the Necron deployment zone.
Yeah, so he's 6 inches away from my battlefield edge and within 6 inches of the side edge there.
And more importantly, where he is, he can see the Immortals and is actually slightly closer to them than the Scarabs. So in the Psychic phase, he can try and manifest Smite. Heating of 5. Gets it with a 6.
The Cannibal Spider is within 24 inches, so I'll try and deny the witch with Gloom Prism. I fail with a 6. I needed to get more than that.
So D3 mortal wounds to the immortals. Just 1.
But he can't reanimate. So we'll just lose that one.
So in the shooting phase, I'll start with the aggressors. They're going to fire their Flamestorm Gauntlets at the Scarabs. 66 automatic hits. 17 hits, wounding on 3s.
11 wounds with a 6+ armor save. No 6s at all. That leaves 1 base left on 1 wound. Do the destroyed bases reanimate, needing 4 5+s to bring 1 back? No.
Do the Skitari next. The Blast Pistol and the Teal Galvanic Rifles are going to go into the Scarab base. The Plasma is going to supercharge and shoot at the Spider, and the Sniper and the Arc Rifle are going to shoot at the Immortals. So I'll do the Blast Pistol, D3 shots for 2. Hitting on 3s, rolling 1s. Yeah, and wounding on 3s, 2 wounds.
That's enough to kill it because it has no save against that.
And I'll do the Plasma on the Spider. 2 shots, hitting on 3s, rolling 1s. They both hit. Wounding on 3s. Right. 2 wounds.
6 to save. Didn't make either, so it takes 4 damage. It goes down to 2.
Yeah, I'll do the Sniper and the Arc Rifle together because they're both going to be wounding on the same rolls and so forth. So the white dice is the Arc Rifle, which hits on a 3. Black dice is the Sniper, hits on a 4. Rerolling 1s. Well, they both hit. And they wound on 3s. Oh, and the Sniper got a 6, so that's a mortal wound in addition.
Yeah, and then 2 saves at AP -2, so 5s. Failed 1, so that's 1 dead and a mortal wound. It's 2 dead total, therefore. Do they come back? 1 does, and no rerolling ones. So 1 will come back in front like that.
And I'll do the Dominus next. He'll put his Phosphor Serpenter into the Spider and then the Volkite Blaster into the Immortals. Use the Volkite Blaster first. 3 shots hitting on 3s because he moved. That's 2 hits. Wounding on 3s. 6s do 2 mortal wounds in addition. So it's just a wound.
With a 3+ save, which I've made.
And the Serpenter on the Spider hits. Wounds on a 5. No. And then the Space Marine Captain is going to throw a crack grenade at the Spider. 1 shot hitting on a 2. It hits. Wounds on a 4. No. In the charge phase, the Captain will charge the Spider. Yeah, 7's enough. The Dominus will charge the Spider as well. A 5, I think, is enough to get him in range.
And they finish their charges like that.
Do the Captain first. He has 5 attacks hitting on 2s. They will hit. And they wound on 5s. Getting 2.
Well, he does 2 damage, so the Spider needs to make 2 6s to live. No. Does it blow up on a 6? Oh, it does. Well, it's the first time that's happened, so both the Captain and the Dominus will take a mortal wound. It's the end of the turn, though, and the Imperium now hold objectives 1 and 2 again, gaining another 2 victory points, going up to 4 as we head into Necron's turn 3. So in my command phase, the Roll Warden heals the wound he is down, and I'll use the Resurrection Orb on the Immortals, who are obviously also going to get My Will Be Done. 2 missing, coming back on 5s. Nope. And then in the movement phase, the Overlord has moved into the ruin. He's going to have to go and take something else out, whereas the Immortals and the Royal Warden are going to move over here. Going to have to shoot that Librarian basically to protect Objective 4 because it's worth more than the other ones. And I don't think I can really take the 2 middle objectives anyway. And then in the reinforcement step, I will bring on my strategic reserves. The 3 Scorpic Destroyers have turned up over here in the Imperium sort of corner. Brings us to the shooting phase. We'll shoot everything at the Librarian. We'll start with the Royal Warden though. 4 shots on 3s. Getting 2. Wounding on 3s, 2 wounds.
2 6+ armor saves. New. Oh yeah, 5s, but yeah.
That's 4 damage straight off. And the Immortals, 6 shots hitting on 3s. Only 3 hits. 3s to wound. 6s are an extra -1 AP. So we do have a -3 AP and a normal wound at -2.
5+. Yes. 6. No.
That's the end of the Librarian at least. Well, no more shooting, so the Overlord will charge those aggressors. I think he needs about a 4. Rolls a 7, that should be enough. And he'll finish his charge there. And the Scorpic Destroyers might as well attempt to charge on the Skitari. I don't really have anything to lose. So they need to roll a 9. They do not. So that brings us to the fight phase, where the Overlord will hit the aggressors. 4 attacks hitting on 3s. So he hit 3 times. Wounds on 2, strength 10. Oh, no, he rolled a 1, so one of them lives.
Well, we'll leave the Sergeant then. He gets to pile in. 4 attacks from Sarge, hitting on 4s. Only gets 1. Wounds on a 3. Yep.
4 plus a normal save. Oh, failed, so Overlord takes 2 damage, he's down to 3. So that will be it for my turn. I don't actually hold any objectives, apart from my own home one, which isn't worth any victory points. So that brings us to Imperium turn 4. You might want the roll again, and making me reveal this, so we're doing Protocol of the Hungry Void, and I'll pick the directive, which is +1 strength for units that charged, were charged, or performed a heroic intervention in melee.
So I'm not going to pick an imperative to be active, but I am going to pick Invocation of Machine Vengeance for my canticle, which is when a unit advances or charges, you roll an extra dice and discard the lowest. So in my movement phase, the Skitarii have moved across, so the Alpha is just in range of Objective 2, and everyone else holds Objective 1. Then the Dominus and the Captain are moving on to fight the Immortals and the Royal Warden, and the Aggressor Sergeant is going to fall back from the Overlord so the Skitarii can shoot at him. So I'll start the shooting phase off with the Skitarii, who are going to shoot everything at the Overlord, and the Plasma will supercharge as well. So I'll do the Plasma because it's important. Hitting on 3s, you're running 1s. Just one hit, wounds on the 3, it does.
4+, made that.
Sniper on a 4, rerolling, hits, 3s.
Oh, it's a 6.
Wounds with the mortal wounds as well.
So he needs to make a 4+, which he doesn't.
D3 damage, 1, so he's down to 1. Arc Rifle, 2 shots, both hit, 3s again, 1 wound.
4+, failed, he's dead. Yeah, that's enough to kill the Overlord.
And then the Dominus will shoot his Volkite Blaster at the Destroyers. 3 shots on 3s because he moved. Only getting 1 hit. Wounds on a 3, 6s do 2 more wounds. Just 2 damage.
They're in cover and they're infantry, so 2+, made it.
So then we'll be on to the charge phase. I'll do the Dominus first. He's going to charge the Immortals only. 3 dice, discarding the lowest, and 9 inches is going to be enough. Then the Captain will charge the Immortals as well. 7, that might be enough. The Captain will finish his charge like that, and I will actually pick him.
Yeah, I won't heroically intervene with the Royal Warden because that will probably result in his death.
Yeah, but I'm going to pick the Captain to go first, and he is going to pile in to bring the Royal Warden in. Party has to fight the Immortals, so 5 attacks on 2s. 3 hits. Wounding on 4s. 1 wound.
6+. Oh, I made it.
So the Dominus will pile into the Immortals, but then he has 3 attacks, hitting on 3s. They all hit. Wounding on 3s, because he's strength 6. They all wound. That's -2.
Yes, so 5+ saves. Failed 2, so 2 will die if they do not reanimate. No, they do. Well, they can reanimate on the other side of the Dominus, bringing all 3 of them in range of the objective, which is important. Now they've attacked the Dominus back. 6 attacks hitting on 3s. 2s actually, yes, because mine will be done, but they will hit anyway. We're strength 5 because of the protocol, so we're winning on 3s. 4 wounds.
4 2+. We failed 2.
Down to 3 wounds. And the Royal Warden gets to go. He can't reach the Dominus, unfortunately, but he will pile in slightly and attack the Captain. 3 attacks on 3s. They will hit. These wound on 3s because he's now strength 6 because of that doctrine. Only 1 wound anyway because of 2s.
3+ for the Captain. Now he takes a wound.
And then that brings us to the end of the turn. So the Imperium do not capture objective number 4, but they do still hold 1 and 2, going up to 6 victory points as we head into Necron turn 4. In my turn, in the command phase, the Royal Warden will let the Immortals fall back and still shoot with his adaptive strategy ability. And the Scorpic Destroyers are going to come over here and make a beeline for the Skitarii. They could go and stand on objective 3, but that wouldn't get me anywhere near winning the game. If I kill the Skitarii, I might have enough time to get some victory points. In the shooting phase, the Immortals are going to try and shoot the Tech Priest Dominus. 6 shots hitting on 3s. That's 5. Wounding on 3s. 5.
4+. 3 damage. Well, that is enough to kill the Dominus.
But that's no more shooting, so the Destroyers will declare a charge on the Skitarii Rangers. They need a 3, they roll a 6. And then they'll charge like that, and we will pile in and attack. So they pile in like this. It does bring models within range of both objectives, and they are still in coherency. Attacking with the Hyperphage Threshers first. 8 attacks, hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s. 1, so 7 hits. They're not in range of a character to use the protocol, which is still in effect. It lasts the whole battle round, even though my noble is dead. So we're winning on 3s. So that's 4 wounds.
4 6+ invulnerable saves. Oh, I made 2.
And 3 attack from the big sword, hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s. So I've got 2 hits. These does wound on 2s, so 2 wounds.
6+ invulnerable again. No, so that's 4 dead. So we're going to lose everyone except the Radio Man and the Alpha.
And then they'll consolidate like this, just to make sure we do take at least one of these objectives.
Black dice will be the regular guy, and the white dice will be the Maul from the Alpha, and these all hit on 4s. Normal hit and a Maul hit. White dice will wound on a 3, and then the other guy will wound on a 5. Got your wound with the Maul.
AP minus 2, I think, so 5+. That made it.
But then the 2 Skitarii have to make a morale test, and they're leadership 8 because they've got the radio man and the alpha. On a 5 or a 6, one of them runs away. Oh no! So one runs away, the other one runs away in a 2. No, he's still there. So I'll take away the alpha because the radio man can test that objective.
And then at the end of my turn, I do take objective 2 and gain a victory point going up to 3. Might be too little too late, but we'll see what happens in the last turn. So we're on to Imperium turn 5. And my last protocol is irrelevant because I no longer have a noble on the battlefield, so it does not activate. It was if you were interested posted on the Undying Legions.
So my turn's going to be very quick. The Ranger Radio Man is going to fall back from the destroyers. Aggressor Sergeant is going to come out to meet him to take objective 1, and the Captain is going to move and take objective 4. And it doesn't matter what else I do because I'll get 4 victory points. I'm not going to charge or anything silly like that. So
yeah, as long as no more Imperial models die, they got up to 10 victory points with these moves. And then I could get the destroyers over to objective 3 for 3 victory points, but that would still only be 10 to 6. So it's definitely going to be an Imperial victory. And we'll recap the game for you now. So that was the game for issue 44 of Warhammer 40,000 Imperium magazine. How do you think that one went?
Pretty well, to be honest. Looking at the forces, I was a little worried, but it did actually work out pretty much how I hoped it would. I think I did get pretty lucky to have a Skitarii left and the Aggressor Sergeant left as well. They should probably be dead. And I was a little worried at leaving the Librarian in reserves for an extra turn. I did intend for him to try and zap the Immortals and maybe time them up, but I think it worked out pretty well, actually. I was able to keep your forces mostly contained in your half of the board. You were never really threatening mine until the destroyers turned up.
Yes, it may have actually been a mistake to let you go first. The point of doing that was I thought you weren't going to be in range to shoot much, and with the cover protocol wasn't going to take much damage, which is what happened. But it then kind of put me on the back foot because you were in the middle of the board by the second turn and I didn't quite have the forces to displace you. It was also important that you destroyed my entire warrior unit with a shooting phase, because if I'd been able to use my resurrection orb on them, just having warriors still alive would have been massively in my favour for trying to take those middle objectives and things like that. Without warriors, I was limited to the Spider and the Scarabs, who didn't really do anything, actually. I should also, I think, have brought the destroyers on in the second turn to contest the middle objectives and reinforce my forces over there. The problem I had was I could send them after objective 3 and get 3 victory points, but then they would be standing around doing nothing, and obviously you weren't going to send forces near them on purpose. But then again, I suppose if they were sitting over there, you would probably have to deal with them. Also, by making you go first, I let you bring in your reinforcements first, which meant you got to dictate the pace of the battle by bringing those guys in near my deployment zone, so I was always reacting to what you were doing, really.
I think a key point is when the Overlord failed to kill the Aggressor Sergeant. He could have consolidated into the Skitarii, who then would have had to fall back, and then they wouldn't have been able to shoot him to death. Although, you wouldn't have gained any more victory points in that case, I suppose.
No, but you would have had to try and do something about him, though, I suppose, because he could then go after one of your characters and help defend my home objective, or even go over by himself to objective 3, and then the destroyers would have been able to do something else.
I mean, yeah, it probably would have been the other way around, where I would have been stuck trying to take 2 middle objectives. Although I did always plan to use the aggressors. I think if you had gotten into my table half, I still would have used the aggressors to try and take your home objective. Just worth more than the middle, so...
Yeah, it's a good use of the aggressors as well, because, as we know, it takes them forever to get anywhere if they have to run all the way across the board. So.
The reason I put them in strategic reserve is so they didn't have to foot slog up the board and get shot at, and they can just turn up and be in flamethrower range as well, and charge range as well. It's a hard charge, though. And the Librarian, although it's probably less vital to put him in strategic reserve, wouldn't have been in range to do any psychic powers in the first turn. Probably would have been in the second turn. But strategic reserve actually just sort of lets me decide where his smite is going to go, because I can just bring him in directly next to what I want him to smite.
Yes, otherwise I would have just been screening with other units. And strategic reserves more generally, I mean, obviously there is the caveat that you would normally have to pay command points for this. We don't know what those are yet, but essentially they're a resource that lets you do special things during the game. So it does cost you something that you could otherwise use to do other things.
Yeah, and I suppose that my strategic reserves for this game would normally be 2 command points. So if we were playing command points, I probably wouldn't have put the Librarian in strategic reserves. I mean, a lot of the units you would probably use for outflanking can already do that, like the flayed ones, but it is useful particularly for units like aggressors, where they're slow and targets that your opponent's going to want to shoot at.
Similarly with the Scorpic destroyers as well, because they are fast, but if you deploy them on your opponent's flank, it's something they do have to deal with immediately, because they're obviously very powerful. It also adds a different spin on an objective game, because rather than just charging down the board, it allowed us to have tactical options, which, I think you used better than I did, really, threatening my home objective with what, on paper, seems like a fairly slow army. And I guess we will have those rules going forward, so especially when it's on these larger boards, it does allow for quite a bit more flexibility in that, and less of the charging across boards into heavy firepower games that we've seen so far.
Yeah, and you can see as well with the board setup that we have a pretty decent amount of terrain now, even with just 3 of the buildings. With the 4th one, it might actually stop getting a bit cramped, but it's nice to have the extra variety the other ruin gives. And the ruin we got with this issue is just the 2 halves of the other ruins, so it's the smaller building with the upper floor, but the larger wall piece.
Yeah, once again, it is actually a decent value, like with the rest of the ruins as well, just because of the price of the magazine. And I suppose just in general, deploying terrain on the board, just deploy it in a way that looks good and isn't going to give too much of an advantage to one side, I suppose. We tend to like quite a lot of terrain on our tables, because it looks better that way, but you can go with as much or as little as you want. But anyway, I think that's it for this video, so let us know what you thought in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy watching. We've been the Tabletop Donkeys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.